The mirrorless wars started in 2018, but they're still going on, and not every manufacturer is going to make it. We're going to tell you whether your manufacturer is on that list. It'll help you make important buying choices. But also, for me, it's like sports, you know, like you pick your team and you're rooting for them and you want to know how they're going to do.
Yeah, I also just think it's fun. It's a really exciting time in camera history, and I want to see who thrives, who dives, what it takes for a camera company to be #1. And we're also asking the question, will Nikon and Panasonic survive?
Oh, name checking them. But first, a word from our sponsor, Squarespace.
Whether you need your own website, store, or portfolio, you can make that happen with Squarespace. And it's so easy. If you can drag and drop, you can make it happen. You can go to squarespace.com/Chelsea and use the coupon code Chelsea to get 10% off. And those links are in the description down below. Thanks, Squarespace.
First, let's catch up. We'll go over a little bit of history. Starting in 2018, we were there for Canon and Nikon launching their full-frame mirrorless cameras after like 60, 70 years of making SLRs.
Yeah.
They finally switched mounts. It was like a huge deal. And the cameras, they just weren't that great. It was their first full-frame mirrorless cameras that they weren't good compared to like Sony, who've been doing it for a long time.
Hey, Sony had been doing it for a while, and people were kind of mocking them for doing these small mirrorless cameras. I remember when like Canon and Nikon were very slow to catch up with the R&D on that, and people weren't sure if Sony was making the right decision, but they were. In 2018, this is also the time that Olympus becomes unprofitable.
Which is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
They start losing money. And Panasonic at that time says, we need to compete on the full frame playing field. Yeah. And so they take their R&D that had been going into their Micro Four Thirds platform, and they'd launch the new full frame L mount. And that's kind of where they put all their energy since. In 2019, the market continued to evolve. Canon and Nikon still way behind. Sony is just gaining more and more market share. I mean, Canon and Nikon, they weren't in the market before, so they get a little bit of market share, but Sony just is way, way ahead. And this is the year that Nikon really starts cutting back on staff because they start losing money too. So now we have Nikon and Olympus both losing significant amounts of money.
Well, Sony's gaining market share. They're #1 in full-frame mirrorless, and they were #2 overall. In 2020, the year that nobody likes, photography is impacted because no one can travel, sports are being limited, weddings are being limited, nobody's really doing them, and photography takes a hit. The camera companies' manufacturing plants also have to close down. So you can see that first quarter of 2020, everyone's feeling it in the camera industry.
Nobody more so than Olympus, which is the first to bow out of the race. They completely exit the camera business and sell off their camera business to JIP Engineering, who took the Sony Vaio system over and didn't really do it any favors. We don't really know what their future is going to be, but it's not great.
They also promised that they would continue to make Olympus cameras and that they would continue to develop the camera lines, but it seems like they're more interested in security cameras at this point, which I don't think appeals to us.
Like, we wanted you to make cameras, but that's not what we meant. So now let's look into the future a little bit, taking all of our experience. A lot of our predictions come true. We're not 100%. Maybe we're not even as good as your weatherman, but we're pretty good at this.
But first I want to talk about how these companies can be #1, how they can be the #1 camera manufacturer. I think the overall health of the company is going to be very important. I think that their camera sales, especially their mirrorless camera sales, are going to be important since most companies seem to be making a shift towards mirrorless.
Right now it's like 50-50.
Yeah.
One DSLR, one mirrorless camera, but it shifts every year towards mirrorless.
I think that research and development and the company's assets will also be a very important part of them gaining their way to the #1 position. So if they continue to do research and development, and if they have some strong assets like sensor technology, that will help them get out ahead. I also think that the company is going to have to move with the market shift. So right now, video is becoming more popular. More people want to make their own videos, Tony. I Googled how to make a YouTube video on Google Trends, and their search has been going up for a long time, but especially now that everyone's at home or out of work, people are thinking about making their own videos.
So now we get to see which camera manufacturers are agile. That's not really something that any of them have excelled at in the past. First up is Panasonic, and you might see that we're starting with one of the most pessimistic companies. In the last couple of years, Chelsea, you really dug into their stock, and the overall company does a lot. Like they're an electronics manufacturer, consumer electronics, and cameras are such a small part of their business, they don't even show up on their financial reports. But their stock has been kind of devastated in the last couple of years, like peaked in 2018.
Yeah, so their stock is going down a bit. I mean, a share is only $8.60 in US dollars. So they're not in a really strong position for cameras right now.
But I think more concerning is that they have been aggressively cutting divisions that are not profitable since that peak, since their stock has been sliding, which feels like a very American company thing to do. You know, Japanese companies tend to fight it out a little bit more, and they're just like, we're going to shed the companies that aren't profitable. And the camera division so far has been spared, which has kind of surprised me. We don't know how much money the Panasonic camera division makes or loses because they don't break it out because it's such a small part of their business. But they sold fewer cameras than Olympus, fewer cameras than Nikon, two companies that we know are not profitable. So it's probably not great. And according to the Nikkei, there's rumors that they're actively looking for an outside partner.
So that's what...
That sounds familiar, right?
That's what Olympus was doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's not a great sign for them. Their research and development also moved from the Micro Four Thirds systems, that's a smaller sensor if you're not familiar, to full frame. That, I think, is a move in the right direction, Tony, because full frame sensors are becoming more affordable, the full frame systems are becoming more affordable, so I think that they made a good move, except for the fact that now they have limited lenses for their full frame cameras, and they also have less of a customer base. They had like a loyal following for their Micro Four Thirds cameras, and now that they're full frame, they may have lost those customers.
Yeah, well, you could take your DSLR Canon lens and put it on a mirrorless camera, Canon body. You cannot do that with Panasonic's Micro Four Thirds to their full frame system. The lenses are not interchangeable. Thus, if you're an existing Panasonic shooter, there's really no motivation to stay within the system. If you're switching, then you might as well shop around between Canon, Sony, Nikon, Panasonic. And honestly, once you start to do that shop around, it can be real tempting. Though I will say, I loved the new Panasonic S5. I think it's the best camera at $2,000. Better than the Sony, but how many people are going to look at it? I don't know.
Yeah, that is a great camera. I was excited about that. Another thing that Panasonic has going for them is that they've always been video-centric, which is a good thing because, like I was saying, more and more people are moving towards video. However, they have a lack of competition in the autofocus. Like, their autofocus in video is not as good as Sony, and now not as good as Canon either.
Yeah, and to share our own personal history, we shot with Panasonic through their GH4 camera, through their GH5 camera, and then we switched to Canon because we realized that the video quality of the Canon was lower, but it could autofocus on our faces, and that made a bigger difference to us.
So I think like diehard filmmakers, like our friend Jordan Drake, he still loves the Panasonic video, and he manually focuses on things, and of course there are a lot of people that do that, but there are also a lot of people that want to more casually make video, and the autofocus capabilities are going to be really important to them.
Yeah, so we hope they pull that together.
They left the top 5 spot for mirrorless camera sales. They have fewer than 6% market share, so that's where they are right now.
Yeah, not looking good. And looking forward into the future, I think we'll see more rumors of them selling the camera division. And in fact, they might actually announce a deal in 2021. Just a prediction. I think they will release a Micro Four Thirds GH6 camera because the GH5 is so popular. I'm sure they can cash in on that and make something worth upgrading to. But I'm betting that's going to be their very last Micro Four Thirds camera. I think they'll continue to see slow sales because they have so much competition, because these new cameras from Canon and Sony are so good at video, at their specialty. They're amazing. And I'm not sure whether we'll see follow-ups to the S1 and the S1R, their full-frame cameras that they launched the platform with. I don't know. But the S5, I still love it, and I'm actively recommending it, and I hope it has a future.
Yeah, me too. It feels like these camera companies are fighting for a bigger piece of a shrinking pie, and so it's going to be difficult. Whoever survives might have enough left over to make it, but we got to see.
Let's talk about Fujifilm.
Yes, so we're going to talk about Fujifilm next, how they're doing, what their shares are like, what their camera sales are like, what their research and development is like. So let's dig into it, Tony. Fuji, their stocks are doing great. And do you know why, Tony?
No, why?
They're going to come up with a coronavirus vaccine, and they've been given a huge amount of money from our government to do so.
From the U.S. government,
yeah.
A Japanese company. That's interesting.
Yeah. So you can see that they've already been on the up and up. Fujifilm is already doing well as a company, but now, despite the challenges of 2020, they're still doing very well. So the overall health of the company is great, and they have a very loyal fan base. So those are things that I think will go well for Fujifilm cameras.
Yeah, there's something about when you get used to a Fuji and then you try to switch to something else, it feels so like ugly, unfun.
It's a little joyless. Like they're a fun camera to shoot with. They were number 3 in mirrorless in 2019 with a 13% market share. And their XT3 sales were really strong. And I read their financial reports, Tony, and they were very happy about that as a company.
But Fuji said the camera division needs to justify itself with profits. And that's really hard right now. And I'm not sure if there's any actual teeth behind that comment or not. Cameras, you said, are only 16% of their overall revenue. Like they're mostly a healthcare company.
Well, yeah, like medical technology.
Medical technology.
But yeah.
Yeah.
They also mentioned in their financial report that they were concerned about competition in the mirrorless market specifically, and just general competition with smartphones.
I'm concerned too, because their X-T4 is a great camera. It's $1,600.
Yeah. And
right now I could go get a Canon EOS R for $1,600 and it's full frame, has a nice top display, it's great. Or I could get an RP for $1,000. Or I could get the Canon Z or the Nikon Z5 for $1,500. Those are all full frame cameras, which really makes a difference in your image quality, and they're less expensive.
That's true, but Fujifilm does have this unique part of the market where they're like tactile and retro and attractive and fun. And I think that they have this element to them that the other camera companies do not have. So who knows?
I've also found that their video autofocus, which we're talking about being such a key thing in 2020, is behind.
Yeah.
We found it to just be sort of unacceptable.
Yeah, they also have less lens development than the other cameras, and I looked up like the searches for the X-T4 versus the X-T3, since those X-T3 sales were so important, and fewer people are searching for the X-T4. It was released earlier this year, which is very unfortunate timing. It's like a very hard time to release a camera, but still, the interest in the X-T4 was not as strong as the X-T3.
So some predictions for 2021. I think Fuji's staying in the game. I'm not worried about their future. I think they'll actually gain some market share as Panasonic and Olympus sort of gradually leave the camera industry. I think we'll see lots of firmware updates and new lenses. I don't know that we're going to see another big flagship camera from them, except maybe a GFX 100R. This is their medium format camera. I think they'll take their GFX 100 that they have now and just smush it into a smaller body.
After the break, we're going to be talking about who we think will win these mirrorless wars. It's going to be Sony versus Canon versus Nikon, and we're going to go through all of that information and let you know. There's some surprising stuff.
Yeah,
like we've been thrown some curveballs.
First, a word from our sponsor, Squarespace. No matter what type of website you need, Squarespace can give it to you, and it will be absolutely beautiful and a breeze to set up. You can drag your pictures in. You can tell the world about your business without having to rely on ad-filled social media. Go to squarespace.com/Chelsea, get a 14-day free trial, and if you love it, use the coupon code Chelsea to get 10% off. Thanks, Squarespace. So we're going through our 2021 Mirrorless Wars camera predictions, how the big three are going to do, Nikon, Sony, and Canon.
Yeah, we're down to the final three, and now we're on Nikon. So I looked up their stocks, and as a company, Nikon is not performing very well. They're at about $6 a share today. That changes day to day, obviously.
But they were at 20 in 2018.
Yes, they also have a downward trend that's pretty severe.
Yeah.
So I think it's been pretty public that the health of the company has been struggling. There's been layoffs and cuts in research and development and things like that. So I am concerned about Nikon, especially because I love their cameras so much.
But Nikon is still #2 for DSLR sales.
Yeah.
That's sort of the previous generation of cameras, but they're still selling strong. Part of that is that they're not managing to move a lot of their existing customers over to the mirrorless platform, which has kind of been goal #1 for them. They have a massive amount of brand trust and recognition. I don't know, I think they're right up there with Canon. When I think of Nikon, my brain first goes back to press photographers covering the war, sort of, I think of ruggedness and trustworthiness, and people still associate it with that.
I think of professionalism, and I think their name is one of the names that is synonymous with photography. When people think Nikon, they think professional camera. And I looked up all the different camera brands in Google Trends again. I looked up Canon camera, Nikon camera, etc. And people were consistently searching for them. And so I think that that brand recognition and that trust in the brand is really valuable.
You know what people say? If I ask them, why'd you get a Nikon? They say, oh, my dad had a Nikon.
Yeah.
And that is really a valuable asset. But while they were #2 in DSLR sales, they're #5 in mirrorless sales, with only 7% of the market. And that's not good. 7%. They're behind Olympus, and Olympus had to sell the camera division.
But Olympus had higher mirrorless sales, but Olympus doesn't have that brand recognition, and they didn't have the DSLR sales either.
Yeah, so they are making some money off of DSLRs, and those customers are going to pick a Nikon mirrorless camera when Nikon makes a mirrorless camera that they want.
Yeah.
So I think they're potential sales.
There was a lot of interest in the Z-mount system, but when they released the Z-mount, they released it in 2 different sensor sizes, and I think that that's like, I think it was too much. I think they just should have stuck with full frame.
Yeah, I criticized the decision to launch the Z50 in APS-C because now their R&D is split between 2 different lens sizes, and there's a lot of market confusion. But I think the Z5 full frame camera, $1,500, we've been testing it, it's really pretty good, especially when you consider that it's $500 less than a Sony a7 III or Panasonic S5. It's got 2 card slots. It's great. Subscribe to see our full review coming soon. But Nikon seems to have some just logistic problems. Like, remember, it took like 18 months for the D850 to finally ship. We had friends who were like, we saw your review a year ago. I want one. I still can't buy one.
Yeah.
They're still struggling with this. Like, I remember I reviewed the 500mm f/5.6 prime, a great wildlife lens, but even 2 years later, like, you can't buy it. And even now, they don't have their holy trinity of mirrorless lenses shipping. That's the 24-70 f2.8, the 70-200 f2.8, the 16-35, just like wide normal telephoto. They have 1 of those 3 lenses are shipping.
What is going on?
The other 2, you can't buy them.
Why is their stuff not shipping?
I don't know what's going on. I mean, I know there's lots of manufacturing problems, but everybody else is shipping their stuff out. Nikon has been struggling with this for years. And the Z5 has one major problem, is it doesn't have a side flip screen. In 2020, when everybody, if they are buying a camera, they at least want it to do part-time duty, filming themselves, you know, people are teaching online, they're making content, they need to be hybrid cameras. They didn't give us any sort of flip screen. It was a baffling choice that will definitely limit the overall market for that camera. And once again, I find myself questioning Nikon's strategic choices, something we've been doing for years, as they put so much energy into like random avenues that don't end up working out, like Nikon 1 or those key mission cameras, which just disappeared, got thrown away.
They're always a little bit behind the curve with the key mission cameras. It just seemed like it was too little, too late. There were already way more affordable options. And now to not have the side flip screen, I know it can seem like a silly thing. You might not need one or want one, but to me, it tells me that they're not thinking about who their future customers will be and what their needs are or what their interests are. So I think that Nikon might need someone a little more forward-thinking to try to do that, like leapfrogging that Canon did.
But they've definitely still got potential because of the millions of existing Nikon DSLR shooters who will want to upgrade to mirrorless.
I mean, if I'm feeling this way, I know many people must be feeling this way. I have so much affection for Nikon, and I love their cameras, and I really trust their company, and I want them to survive.
I know you feel that way because in my notes I wrote, they're not going to launch a Nikon D860. And you were like, what do you mean? Because you still want an updated D850 DSLR.
Well, no, so I question that you think that they won't launch that because their DSLR sales are the only thing that are doing well. So why would they not develop a DSLR? Because they need money right now. And I don't think it's like a long-term good strategy, but they just need cash. And they could potentially use the sales of the D860 to like fund more R&D for their mirrorless cameras. So
it's a short-term versus long-term strategic decision. A D860 would sell well today, but would keep people from moving to their Z-mount system. And I thought they weren't going to make one, not because I think that's the right choice, but because they seem laser focused on getting people to move to the Z system. If I were running Nikon, I don't know that I ever would have developed the Z-mount. I think I might have just kept selling DSLRs and refining those because that's how they can actually make some money.
Ooh, that's like giving up the bigger fight though, but I see what you mean. There was like a split in the road and you have to choose.
I mean, look, let's talk about Pentax, which we haven't brought up. They made the decision to never go mirrorless, which I believe was the right choice for Pentax. They were not going to be able to win that market. They knew the market was shrinking. So they just said, we're going to focus on what we do. We're going to continue to shrink the company, and we think we can make it profitable until it disappears. But I think it's better to sort of fade out than to spend a whole bunch of your shareholders' cash going into a fight that you're definitely going to lose.
I mean, that's a
valid
argument.
Yeah, not everybody's going to agree with that. I'm confident we're going to see a Z6 and Z7, a Z6S and a Z7S, and there's already rumors about those. Those cameras desperately need an update. They were their first generation cameras. Firmware updates have improved them, but they have serious weaknesses like no flip screens, single card slots, and just generally low horsepower. They're outdated now.
I have my fingers crossed. I'm like hoping for them. We think that they won't grow their market share in 2021?
They think they won't. Even they say this in their financial reports. They expect their market share to shrink, which is such a pessimistic statement for the actual company to make about themselves.
Man.
And they're just cutting R&D left and right. That's how they're solving this we're losing money problem, not by putting more in and trying to catch up, but by just backing off and almost conceding it. And that, it just really concerns me. I want to see them invest more because they're such a valuable brand.
Okay, our next company that we're talking about is Sony. Let's see those stocks, Tony. They've been on the up and up. Sony's a really strong company. You know, they're a well-diversified company. They're in the entertainment industry. They're in consumer electronics. They've got it all going on. They have smartphones.
They make their own sensors.
They make the
sensor in your smartphone, almost certainly. And I think the camera division makes sense strategically from them because they want to own the content creation, the content distribution, the content showing. You know, they'll sell you a camera, they'll sell you a TV, end to end. It can be Sony. I
think Sony's really gunning for that #1 spot because they put so much money into the R&D for the mirrorless system when nobody else was doing that. And for me, that tells me they see an industry that's shrinking and then they go hard into the R&D for mirrorless. I think they want that #1 spot and they want all of it. They want to be the survivor of all of this.
Yeah. Canon, Nikon, Panasonic switched to full frame mirrorless in 2018. Sony did it in like 2014 or something. Like they were just so far ahead. And that gave them a huge head start. That gave them faster technology. And in 2019, that translated to them getting 42% of the overall mirrorless camera market share, but a vast majority of the full frame mirrorless camera market share.
They took a risk and it paid off.
And I love that they listened to their customers. like the most recent generation of cameras finally has the side flip screens, what people have been asking for. They resisted that, but then they finally just said, okay, here you go. They also, with the A7S III, give us that new menu system that we've been begging for, and they made refinements to their video AF so that now it's at least it's as good as Canon.
Yeah.
And I am switching my own video filming from Canon over to Sony, which is a big choice for me. It means swapping out all my lenses, learning a new system, but it's worth it.
Okay.
Because they made the best camera.
They're willing to listen, they're willing to adjust, and that's going to be really important with the way things are changing. Our 2021 predictions for Sony is that they're going to come out with an A7 IV with a side flip screen and 4K 60 to compete with the R6.
I also think they'll compete with Canon on those f1.2 primes. Maybe I'm projecting a little bit. I love those Canon primes so much. I want them for Sony.
This might be personal for you.
And I also think they will try to drive the price of their full-frame cameras down, maybe by launching what I'd call an A5. I'm not sure, because right now they offer APS-C cameras at the lower price points, but I think they're going to need full-frame cameras to keep up with the Z5 and the Canon RP at these low price points. And I think they'll devote less and less of their R&D to their APS-C lineup, which they'll probably just try to fade out.
You're going to inflame a few APS-C enthusiasts with that statement, but I agree with you.
They haven't been doing much for those people anyway. Like, look at the new APS-C lenses they've released. Like, just nothing. They've just, I don't know. Okay.
All right, and our final company is Canon.
Ooh, they came out of nowhere this past year.
Okay, so
I did not expect
this was the curveball. It was just like, I was waiting. Canon's first mirrorless cameras, full-frame mirrorless cameras, I was like, this is it from Canon. I really expected so much more. I thought that that was their full effort, but I remember we had a podcast about predictions, and I said, maybe they're banking all their tech so that they can completely leapfrog everybody. And it seems like that's what Canon did, because the R5 is a really good camera. The overall health of their company is down for the past few years.
Yeah, about 50% from 2018. It's a big drop.
Yeah, that is true, but they're a well-diversified company. They're a big company. I know they rely a lot on like printers still. Like that's just like a cash cow for them.
Yeah.
The printer stuff. So you got that going for you, Canon. But they have this legacy and this history, and they're just synonymous with cameras. And when I compared on Google Trends how everybody searched all of these different cameras, consistently Canon is #1. More people are searching Canon cameras all of the time. And so they have the brand recognition. If they come out with a good camera, they do have the R5 and the R6, people will be there to buy them.
Absolutely.
They were behind on mirrorless tech. They only had a 24% market share. That's because they were kind of dragging their feet.
But this is in 2019.
Yeah.
Like this is when all they had was the EOS R and the RP and then like the M cameras.
Yeah.
Before the R5 and the R6, which I think are going to change things.
The R5 and the R6 have been, I haven't seen this much excitement around launches in a long time.
Yeah, I don't know that I ever have. The R5 especially is absolutely huge, and that's why every other video that we make is about the R5, because that's just what people want to see.
You all want to hear about the R5, and it's not just people on our channel. Again, I'm on Google Trends all the time, guys. I'm looking at trends. The R5 launch was bigger than any other launch in the past 4 years as far as searches went for that camera.
Yeah, and one of my favorite photographers seems to be switching to it. Talking about you, Chelsea.
I know. So our 2021 predictions for Canon cameras are that they're going to come out with some less expensive lenses.
Yeah, I think they need to give us a nifty 50. You know, they need people buying that $1,000 EOS RP to have some inexpensive glass to put on it. They've started that. I also think we'll see an R1 soon. Maybe not 2021, maybe 2022, but this is a replacement for their 1DX. Like, after using the R5 and R6, I think they're ready to make a pro-grade mirrorless camera, something that would properly compete with the A9. But I also think they need to continue to go cheaper. Like, I want to see them drive eventually to that $500 full-frame RF camera to get those entry-level buyers. I think the next stop will be more like $800, $700. And I've seen Canon actually putting a lot of energy into things like image.canon, like wirelessly transferring files, providing improved workflow, whereas nobody else is really listening.
Yeah.
And they seem to care about that. And so I think we'll see some big advancements in 2021, though I'm not exactly sure what form it's going to take. I just think they'll have some new services.
Okay, I'm hoping that they advance their connectivity and their file transfer, and they keep working on that. That's what I'm hoping to see from them, but I'm not sure if we'll see it in 2021. Tony.
So let's talk about the mirrorless wars. Like, for the longest time, it was Canon versus Nikon.
Yes.
From like the 50s up until about 2019. But I think the summary is 2020, the discussion is now Canon versus Sony.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're back down to two main manufacturers, and it's not Canon and Nikon anymore.
I always like more manufacturers because more competition means they're trying a little bit harder, but it does seem to be whittling down. And I think Canon's going to come out on top. How about you?
I think they're going to be back and forth, just like Canon and Nikon were for so many decades. I think they'll constantly be outdoing themselves. And if one of them pulls ahead significantly, it's going to be because they stopped competing and comparing themselves to the other and started competing with iPhones and Google Pixels and Samsung S whatevers.
You're right that that's the real competitor is smartphones, and that they need to adapt more smartphone-like technology to get more users on board. So I guess we'll see where the future of cameras is headed. I'd like to hear all of your opinions about that for sure in the comments down below. And I also want to thank our sponsor, Squarespace, for making this podcast possible, but also for making great and simple websites possible. Tony and I have a bunch between the both of us, and we really like them. And it's a great way to get your photo seen in a way that's not just chronological, like on your social media, but that shows your best work first. That if your clients are looking at your photos, they're seeing the photo you're most proud of the way you want it to be seen. You can get a 14-day free trial, no credit card needed. There's absolutely no obligation. Just try it, and if anything, it will just be a good exercise in seeing which photos are your favorite and what your portfolio should look like. You can do it for free. Go down into the description down below, go to squarespace.com/Chelsea and use the coupon code Chelsea to get 10% off. That'll save you money. It'll also let Squarespace know that we're doing a good job with everything, just in general in life. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you soon in our next podcast.
Bye.
Bye.
I had to pick the dog up like it's a Zoom call.